Kia ora. This is how to use the Twig tool. It's a visual aid for writing about genetic variation. So let's have a look. These are tree. What do we start off with? We look at the sources of variation. What will cause variation? And there's two sources. One is sexual reproduction, the variation that's introduced with that, as well as mutations. So you'll see we're going to go into two different branches. So for the sexual reproduction, where does that variation come in? First of all, the randomness of meiosis, where we have the genetic material randomly crossing over, as well as the fertilization, the randomness of which sperm meets up with which egg. So that is what needs to be mentioned. So it's that independent assortment, nothing relying on anything. Meiosis, as I said, the crossing over of the chromosomes. Um, there's a random way that the pairs line up. So again, that's more randomness that's coming in. There's a new combination that's caused by this randomness in the daughter cells with the gametes. And so each offspring will have a different genetic material. So it's all new combinations. Then when we look at the crossing over, how the randomness comes over there, it's those homologous pairs lining up on the equator, that random chromatid exchange between those two chromosomes. Okay, and therefore you're going to have different combinations of alleles in the offspring, okay, in those daughter cell gametes. Well, this is again in the gametes. And when we get to the fertilization, so we've dealt with the randomness in meiosis and how we can get all this different variation of the way meiosis works, of making those gametes, the sperm and the egg. Now with the fertilization, it's going to be a random sperm fusing with a random egg, and so you're always going to get a new combination of the chromosomes in the zygote. So each zygote will have a unique genetic material that no other one will have, unless, of course, it's an identical twin. The other way variation can occur, so you might get this question of variation in the population, in both when you're talking about sexual reproduction as well as mutations, is with a mutation is when in the gametes, when there's been a copying error. So the base sequence, instead of being like CT or something, it is now CTC or something. So it's a change in the base sequence, so that makes a difference in the protein being produced, and also the change in the phenotype. Okay, because of that change in the base sequence, so it's expressed in a different way. The other way you could get a change is the base pairs were not changed due to an incorrect copying, but simply there was mutagen like radiation, something like that, that upset the gamete. It might already have its DNA, but because of that radiation, it might change. So that's an example there, and that causes that change in base sequence, and therefore the change in the protein produced, and therefore the change in the phenotype. So when you're answering these sources of variation, think of a logical sequence in your argument. So think of this tree, think of all the bits in the meiosis, the fertilization parts. I mentioned both of those, and the mutation, if that's in the question, of course. So use logical sort of sequences as a result. Therefore, this results in consequently. And so, and it affects this. So those sort of things. So hopefully that helps. Think of the tree when you're trying to discuss genetic variation. Kia ora.